War strike action was happening. 0345 6060 973. From I don't know who. From Amelia Cox. There she is.
The Business Secretary has introduced new anti-strike laws to Parliament, which the government says will ensure minimum safety levels. The legislation has been described as an attack on workers' democratic rights by the Fire Brigades Union. More than 1,000 jobs are at risk as Amazon plans to cut 3 warehouses in the UK. Sites in Hemel Hempstead, Doncaster and Guruk in Inverclyde have been scheduled to close. And Ukrainian officials believe Russian forces have taken control of most of a small town in eastern Ukraine. 2 British men who were volunteering in the country have also gone missing after wet and windy across the UK this afternoon. Drier for a time in the south before another band of rain moves in. Highs of 13 degrees.
LBC.
Here are the words every timeshare owner will be dreading to hear. Your 2023 timeshare maintenance fees are due. If you own a timeshare, you need to consider whether it's a good investment. MyTimeshareClaim.co.uk has helped thousands of owners who were missold exit their contract and receive compensation. If you bought a timeshare after 5th of January 1999, text timeshare to 78900. That's timeshare to 78900 to find out more.
Pay, get paid. Pay, get paid. With Barclaycard, get paid in store. Get paid online. Get paid from Switzerland. Cashflow. Pay suppliers on time, every time. Become their favourite client. Get thank you gift basket and macaroons. Get cash back on business spend. New espresso machine in staff room. Oh, paperwork. Wait, free accounting software. Search Barclaycard Payments. The payment part is just the start. Offers now available. The approval of your application depends on financial circumstances and borrowing history. T's and C's apply. Free accounting software provided by FreshBooks for selected Barclaycard customers only.
Home builder Henry has 30 townhouses that need buying off plan. But Henry is a man with a plan. He's booked his next campaign on radio, so he's safe as houses, knowing he's about to reach thousands of first-time buyers. Be a Henry. Text radio to 60777.
Deep breath and relax.
Forget work-life balance. What about your news-life balance? When the news becomes the noise, try The Week magazine for a calmer insight on what matters. Concisely edited from over 200 trusted global news sources, it's all you need to know about everything that matters, with your first 6 issues free. Then auto-renews for $38.99 a quarter, cancel any time. Possibly the most balanced view available, without standing on one leg. Search The Week, free.
Experience. It's knowing that Saga Travel Insurance has your back wherever you go. With Saga, you're covered for up to £10 million of emergency medical expenses. You can relax in an airport lounge if your flight is delayed by over an hour. Plus, receive same-day payments when making a claim. Simply search Saga Over 50s Travel Insurance for a quote today. Saga Travel Insurance. Experience is everything.
Same-day payments made if approved before 4 p.m. UK time. Register your flight 6 hours before departure. Provided by Astrenska Insurance Limited.
Sheila Fogarty on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
As is the nature with a very active war and the kind of war that's taking place in the east of Ukraine, a great deal of it goes on unseen. There are some extremely brave and capable journalists, particularly television journalists, going into some of these areas and eventually, when it's safe to do so, sending out material, gathering material to start with and then sending it out. Think of somebody like Quentin Somerville on the BBC. I mean, his stuff online, if you don't watch television news, his stuff online is absolutely, it's just beyond impressive. But again, it takes great courage and skill to know what to do to get those reports. So a great deal of it is going unseen. I'm just reading some of the detail here. On that news that we heard in the headlines, that Russia is, according to the UK's Ministry of Defence, likely to be in control now of most of a salt mining town called Soledar in Ukraine's in the eastern part of Ukraine. This is after a battle that's gone on for months with Ukrainian forces. It's near a place called Bakhmut, which we've heard about as well. Ukraine also in the midst of an apparently endless battle with Russia there as well. So these are dark days for anybody fighting there or living there. President Zelensky says that there is almost no life left in Solidar. This is what madness looks like, he says. So there's some, deeply ugly, awful, desperate things happening that we aren't particularly seeing. And add to that, the news that the UK says it's willing to send battle tanks to Ukraine, as British aid workers, 2 of them, have gone missing. Here to talk about this with me, some of the elements of it, are Tobias Ellwood, Chair of the Defence Select Committee and Conservative MP for Bournemouth East, and Elizabeth Broad joins us too, Foreign Policy Expert and Senior Fellow at the American Enterprise Institute. Good afternoon to you both.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Tobias Ellwood, first of all, I mean, it is easy to forget just how brutal this all is, isn't it, when we just dip in and out of what's going on there?
Yeah, I'm glad you start with that, because we are seeing on a daily basis, you report it, the death and destruction that Russia is causing, not just on the battlefield, but of course against the Ukrainian civilian population by targeting that critical national infrastructure. Many may ask then, why has it taken so long for us to really upgrade our support, our military hardware, given that President Zelensky has been calling this for some time? So I very much welcome the news that we're now considering sending main battle tanks. It shows how far we've come in our willingness to look Putin in the eye and not be spooked by his rhetoric, as we finally send the much needed serious hardware to Ukraine that will significantly upgrade Ukraine's combat effectiveness on the battlefield.
And remind people, if they need reminding, why it matters that we continue to do this, we the UK.
Well, another great question. I mean, how often do we hear a minister come on the radio, the television and so forth, blaming Ukraine for the inflationary pressures here? Had the war not taken place, I understand inflation will be around 4%. You'd be having a very different conversation with the public sector, looking at pay increases if that were the case. So this isn't just about Ukraine and the hardship they're enduring. This is also about the fact that because that grain can't get out of Odessa, for example, it's affecting food prices here in the UK. Because of insecurity is bleeding across Eastern Europe, it's having a knock-on effect on every aspect of life. So it's in our interest, not just because it's just the right thing to do to support Ukraine and democracy, but it's also because economically it is sound to stand up to Russia. Russia is returning to type. This is what an expansionist Russia's motherland does, so large that the only way that it can defend itself is by going on the attack. This is what it's done in the last few centuries. And the idea that Putin might be removed or replaced somehow, this is what Russia does. And we need to wake up to that. The last 3 decades have actually been perhaps, we've been fortunate, we've been lucky, but I'm afraid Cold War, conflict is coming back, and we need to, I think, rekindle the sense of statecraft that we used to not be spooked by that rhetoric.
Let me ask Elizabeth Broad about that final point there, and do feel free, Elizabeth, obviously, to comment on the other stuff that we were talking about. Did we fool ourselves at the end of the Cold War? Or was it an understandable optimism that we tried to build on, but it's failed?
It was an understandable optimism, and we should remember that lots of countries were making exactly the sort of decisions that indicated that they wanted to become more like us. But I think the folly was for us to think that they would go the whole way. So, for example, China becoming not just a market economy but a democracy. It's not inevitable that countries go the path that we have gone as Western countries over the centuries, and that's what we are seeing now. As Tobias just said, Russia has reverted to its old ways, even though it looked like a very positive development in the 90s with democracy and market economy and so forth. And it's just a reality that is now painfully apparent, but has been in the works, or has been developing over a number of years now. And it's to be the UK government and others are to be saluted for recognizing this reality, albeit a little bit late.
But given that it's late, or it was late, has NATO, so US, UK, European countries, has NATO pivoted properly now, or should it pivot even further towards lean in, as they say, to this reality?
NATO has a very specific purpose, which is to defend the territory of its member states against military aggression. So I think there's a risk in seeing NATO as the solution to every national security problem. There are many national security problems that have nothing to do with military aggression. For example, China buying up our best companies. There's clearly very little NATO can do about that. Or disinformation or cyber aggression. So NATO does fantastic work in its area. And for the rest, we have to either think of new informal alliances or work just purely on the national basis.
And when, Tobias Ellwood, when we start to hear senior Russian figures talk about Russia being at war with the UK and the US, does that concern you?
Yes, it's exactly what Putin was trying to turn this into from the very start, which is why I think we were wrong not to have actually sent in a division of NATO forces to Ukraine in the first place to prevent Russia from invading. Don't forget, this actually started back in 2014, and each time Russia does something, we condemn it, but we don't react. So this news that we're sending tanks is quite significant. But I'd go further to say that it still is only military assistance. This is only about tactical. We need to start thinking strategic. Talk about Odessa and the grain not being able to get out. Why is it that Russia is determining the UN agreement? We should be controlling or helping control that port under a UN mandate so that all that grain can get out. All these weapon systems and vehicles that are going into Ukraine is actually quite complex from a procurement and support perspective. So many variants on the battlefield now. Longer term, we need to be looking at a large weapons factory in eastern Poland so that can be run by Ukrainians, so they can then have the weapon systems, the military capability and assistance that they need in the long term. This is exactly, actually, ironically, what Taiwan is doing in the Arizona desert, because they're a little bit worried about something happening in their neck of the woods. So we talk about NATO. I'm afraid NATO has sat on its hands. It's a consensus-driven organization, and Hungary and Turkey will not tolerate the idea that NATO could be used to put this fire out. There's another organization called the Joint Expeditionary Force, which is a smaller grouping of NATO countries that doesn't have the same strict rules. And I would encourage Britain to invite Ukraine to join that, so it has that umbrella of security in the future. Otherwise, Russia will just do this again in a couple of years' time.
Let me get Elizabeth's take on that. The role that NATO could have played to prevent, in a military sense, could have played to prevent the invasion happening in the first place last February, and the role it could now play militarily.
So I think that the challenge is that any country will be afraid of provoking, any democratic country will be afraid of provoking an authoritarian, aggressive country. So the reason that NATO, as Tobias says, sat on its hands was that NATO leaders, national leaders and leaders at NATO itself were concerned that by actively supporting Ukraine in ways beyond what NATO was doing, NATO would provoke Russia, and then we would have a much worse conflict. You can say that was a correct assessment or not. It's very hard to assess Russian decision making and thinking, because we just don't have any connections into the Kremlin anymore to understand how their thinking goes. That would help a lot if we did, but we don't. So where we are now is that at the beginning of the war, NATO leaders said that we'll supply a little bit, and credit to the UK government for being one of the most assertive countries in providing military assistance to Ukraine. So they tested that for a while, and what has been interesting and I think heartening to see is that military support has increased over these past few months, and now we're up to considering sending tanks, which would have been, I think, completely almost outrageous thought last February, simply because it would have been seen as so provocative. But now we are at that point where we have tested the Russian response, and we assess that they will not be in a position to retaliate if we do that.
And on that, Tobias Ellwood, if you wouldn't mind keeping it brief, I was going to leave it there, but on what Elizabeth just said there about tanks a year ago, it would have been outrageous. I don't think you'd have thought that, would you, at the time?
Well, I was encouraging us to do far more faster because, and I'm pleased we're getting this way. Let's not forget that Russia's ability to endure hardship is far, far greater than ours, and in the
Until the 25th of January, book your flight to St. Martin from £586 or Osaka from £779 from London via Paris, return including tax. Fly with Air France, voted Western Europe's best airline for the second year running by Skytrax. Elegance is a journey. Air France. To book and for terms and conditions, visit airfrance.co.uk.
This winter, we're here for you. So how does broadband at half the price for half the year sound? That's right, superfast fibre for just $14.49 a month. There's nothing to pay up front, and it comes with a £20 money-back speed guarantee. That's half-price broadband right through till summer. Get your skates on. The BT winter sale ends 1st of February. Currently $28.99 for month 7. 24-month contract. CPI plus 3.9% increase each March. New customers only. Terms apply.
Leading Britain's conversation. LBC with Sheila Fogarty.
Well, we certainly try to lead Britain's conversation, and today in the House of Commons there is a conversation taking place largely between the Business Secretary Grant Shapps and the Deputy Leader of the Labour Party, Angela Rayner. This is about a proposed bill which Grant Shapps says would protect lives and livelihoods by maintaining minimum public service levels during strikes. Angela Rayner sees it rather differently. Here's what she said.
We all want minimum standards of safety, service and staffing. It is the Minister's failing to provide it. Does he not accept that trade unions and workers already take steps to protect the public during action? He singles out ambulance workers. Paramedics agreed to operate life and limb deals on a trust-by-trust basis, as he knows, to ensure the right care continued to be delivered. He should know that service levels were at 82% with ambulance workers consistently leaving the picket lines to make sure that emergency calls were responded to. He is threatening, Mr. Speaker, to rip up that protection. And for what for? Let's look into what this is really all about. A government that is out of ideas, out of time, and fast running out of sticking plasters. A government that is playing politics with nurses and teachers' lives because they can't stomach the cooperation and negotiation that's needed. A government desperately doing all it can to distract from its economic emergency. Negotiation, not legislation. So when is the Minister going to do his job? Where is the consultation or meaningful way forward he mentioned? Or was this all for show? Because that is the implication of his other proposal, his sacking nurses bill.
Well, that's what she wants to stick, isn't it? The sacking nurses bill. The law that's being brought in is expected to cover health and education services as well as transport and fire and rescue services. Now, health and education is a huge remit.
they do things differently. They make sure that strikers, that public, that strikers, they've got different strike, that their strike laws are very strict. And I'm not sure that's true. I just they're economical with the truth. We've known that for some time.
All right, Joy, thank you very much indeed. The line isn't great, but we absolutely get the gist of how you feel about it. A quick word with Deborah in Bromley before we go to the news. Hi, Deborah.
Hello, Sheila. First time through, so a little bit nervous. I've been infuriated with this government for years, but they've incensed me to such a degree with these ridiculous new laws that I don't think I'll take my blood pressure today. I better skip a day. I can't believe the hypocrisy. They haven't given a thought to minimum service or the fact that service wasn't up to standard all the time they were secure in power. And now suddenly, when we're going not fast enough, in my opinion, towards an election, it's suddenly necessary that no one falls through the cracks and there's a minimum level of service. Do they think we're fools? Because if they think we just swallow this hook, line and sinker, they're even madder of a box of frogs than I thought they were in the first place.
Now, I didn't write the script to what you've just said, but I could have, Deborah, because I agree with every word of it. I agree with every word of it.
Honestly, it's bad enough what they're doing, but then to ladle the icing on top and believe and make you think that we're fools.
Suggest that we've had marvellous delivery until there's dreadful strikers started to strike.
To see through this, that just really just plops the icing on the cupcake.
It does. It does. I don't think you should take your blood pressure today.
I'm not going to. Today I'm going to give it a miss, and then I won't listen to anything political tomorrow, and I'll take it tomorrow and jot it down.
You should breathe very deeply, yeah. I, however, have to carry on, and I was just saying to my colleagues, my face is a bit hot. I'm coming down with something, or it's my blood pressure, I don't know. Deborah, thank you. Deborah in Bromley. I said at the very beginning of the programme that there's a kind of accidental theme, really, to the 3 hours, which is the world of work. Labour's Shadow Work and Pension Secretary has revealed plans today to encourage older workers and people with medical conditions or disabilities back into work. So if that means you, let's talk about why you're not in work and what would get you back into work.
On your radio, on Global Player, and
Play LBC.
leading Britain's conversation, this is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 2 o'clock.